ahavat chesed utzedakah uveracha verachamim v'chaim v'shalom sim shalom sim shalom tova uvracha chaim v'chesed verachamim verachamim aleinu ve'el kol Yisrael amecha v'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael v'kol etu v'kol sha'ah b'shlomecha sim shalom tova uvracha chaim v'chesed verachamim verachamim aleinu ve'el kol Yisrael amecha v'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael v'chol etu v'chol sha'ah b'shlomecha sim shalom tova uvracha chaim v'chesed verachamim verachamim aleinu ve'el kol Yisrael amecha.
Sefer Chaim, Baracha v'Shalom, Ufarnasav Tova v'Nizker v'Nekatev lefanecha, Anachnu v'Chol Amcha Beit Yisrael l'Chaim Tovim u'L'Shalom Baruch Atah Adonai Oseh HaShalom. We take one more moment for the silent words of our own hearts and minds.
Hiyu leratzon imreithi v'egyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri Adonai tzuri v'gohali oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru Amen. You can be seated. You can The first memory that I have of talking about Israel is from far back in my childhood. It was a conversation about peace. I remember asking my parents when Israel would have peace. I must have heard about it at Cheder or overheard grown-ups speaking about it. I don't remember the specifics of how I came to understand that Israel didn't have peace or that it was something we wanted. I just remember asking the question. And I remember the answer. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe not for a long time. This moment is so deeply embedded in my memory that I can see where my parents and I were standing in the front hallway of my grandparents' flat where we were living at the time, which means I was about 4 years old, and it was somewhere around the mid-1980s. That was a period marked by acts of terror in the fallout of the 1982 war with Lebanon, and also by the release of Natan Sharansky from imprisonment. Certainly the discussion of any of those events might have been what precipitated my question to my parents, but I didn't understand any of those details or nuances. I understood that we were Jewish and that being Jewish was important to us. And I knew that Israel was part of being Jewish and that Israel was important to us. And I knew that there was a thing called war and a thing called peace. War was bad and peace was good. We wanted peace. But here were my parents telling me that peace wasn't coming. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. The feeling of hope turned to disappointment in that moment has never really left me. Some 10 years or so after I asked my parents about peace in Israel, we joined Jews all over the world watching with excitement and tears of joy as Rabin stood at the White House shaking hands, first with Clinton and then with Arafat. What a moment. Our hope swelled. Peace was at hand. Egypt, Jordan. Now it seemed the Palestinians were willing to come to the table and try. Soon we would have peace on all our borders and within our land, surely. Only 2 years later, on the same sofas, eyes glued to the same televisions, tears again, but this time of shock and sorrow. As we watched the coverage of Rabin's assassination, hope shattered by 3 silver bullets. I understood that this was a tragedy. I understood that this would be a setback. I did not understand that Israel would never really recover, that this wasn't just a blow to peace, this was a line in the sand, not drawn between us and our Arab enemies, but a line rending the Jewish world in two. Another half a decade or so goes by, and the hopes renewed by the Camp David talks in 2000 are literally blasted away by the onslaught of terror that marked the Second Intifada. And by then, I was in varsity trying to explain current events to my non-Jewish friends. Why the 1,000 years of conflict? Why was peace so difficult to achieve? Who was on the right side of the wars, the demolition, the security fence? Who was on the wrong side? And I began to understand the way my parents looked the first time I asked about peace, the uncomfortable silence that preceded the answer. My parents knew what I was learning as a young adult, that there weren't easy answers, that it was hard to answer with honesty and with hope at the same time. All through my life, decade after decade, each time I felt hope about Israel and then watched as it slowly or swiftly faded to despair, I find myself right back in that moment, feeling the helplessness of a child who doesn't understand why the grown-ups can't fix the problem, why they looked saddened by my hope and why they didn't share it. Merriam-Webster defines hope as desire accompanied by expectation or belief in fulfillment. This definition to me feels a bit thin. It doesn't really capture the excitement of hope, the almost painful longing of hope. American psychologist Charles Snyder, who developed a positive psychology concept called hope theory, teaches that hope is the belief that your future will be better than your present, and that you have the ability to make it happen. It involves both optimism and a can-do attitude. According to hope theory, hope has three distinct parts: goals, the cornerstone of hope; agency or willpower, the ability to stay motivated and meet your goal, which involves believing that good things will come from your actions; and pathways, the specific routes developed to meet your goals. And hope theory teaches that if your first pathway doesn't work, you problem solve to find a new pathway. High hope people, it claims, understand that roadblocks are inevitable and that it might take several tries to reach your goals. Hope theory also tries to answer the question of whether hope is an emotion. And according to hope theory, while hope certainly evolves emotion, hope itself is not an emotion. Hope is a way of thinking or a state of being. This means that hope can be taught. Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, means the hope. Its lyrics were written in 1886 by Naphtali Hertz Imber, a poet originally from Galicia. And although many Jews know the Hebrew song off by heart, we don't always take the time to stop and think about what the words mean. As long as within our hearts the Jewish soul sings, as long as forward to the east to Zion looks the eye, our hope is not yet lost. It is 2,000 years old to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. What is the hope that Hatikva speaks of? The answer is given clearly right in the text: the hope of 2,000 years, the hope of a people to be free in a land of their own, a specific land, a land tied to their history and theology, the land of Zion. And those of us who love the land of Israel, even if we don't always love all that Israel's government is doing, when we sing these words, if we understand what we're saying, we feel that swell of pride and joy that this hope has been realized, that the Jewish people, after wandering the world for so long, being mistreated and oppressed in so many places and times, have finally returned to a land of our origins, a land that's meant to guarantee our safety and security and our right to be Jewish. But has the state of Israel truly lived up to that hope? When we think about Israel and hope today, it's not just the 2,000-year-old hope of a Jewish homeland that we're thinking of. It's the hope for peace. It's the hope for a Jewish homeland that exemplifies the central values of Torah. Not just dedication to Jewish living and learning, but daily living out of the Jewish values of tikkun olam, care for the stranger and vulnerable, Jewish unity. Tribes who might live separately on the land or outside of it, but who come together when times are tough to protect the land, yes, but more importantly, to protect one another. And this Israel, I must sadly admit, has not yet been achieved. It's a hope not yet realized. Israel has not yet achieved peace within or without her borders. And Israel's current leaders have slowly but surely traded security and political power to the most fundamental and dangerous segments of the Jewish community, the very same communities as the ones which produced the hand that pulled the trigger that ended Rabin's life. The biggest threat to Israel today is not our Arab neighbors. It's not climate change. It's not Russia. The biggest threat to Israel today is the division between Jews. Every year on Tisha B'Av, we recall the rabbinic teaching that what caused Jerusalem to fall, what brought about the end of Jewish autonomy, the lack of which lasted more than 2,000 years, was sinat chinam, the hatred of one Jew toward another. The biggest threat to Israel today is the power that is currently in the hands of Jews who care more about regulating other Jews than they do about securing peace and prosperity for all. These are not the people who share our same hopes that we have for Israel. They don't share our vision for Israel. They don't derive the same values from Torah. They don't recognize anyone's rights but their own. And yet, there are those who even now are still naming reasons to hope. We can hope that Israel's protest movement, a movement which has brought together segments of Israeli society who had previously found themselves on opposite sides of an argument, we can hope that this movement will result in a more united majority of Israeli citizens. We can hope that there might come out of this political crisis a renewed effort to produce an Israeli constitution, the lack of which has contributed to the current threats to Israeli democracy. We can hope for a new election. We can hope. I've been finding it harder and harder to hope, however. Harder and harder to see the way through the current predominant question of how Israel can be both Jewish and democratic. But recently I was reminded that there are ways in which Jews come together across differences and divides. Models of Jewish community right here in South Africa, in fact, that might just keep that small flame of hope alive for those of us who've been struggling to nourish it. Last month, former MK Dov Lipman, an Orthodox rabbi who was a member of the Yesh Atid party under Yair Lapid, who now hosts a weekly radio show on Voices of Israel called One Nation, and who serves as a political correspondent for the Jerusalem Post and the Times of Israel, came to South Africa as one of the international presenters at Limud. And when I attended his session at Limud Cape Town, I found myself surprised at how many points of alignment there were between my perspectives on Israel and his. And I was reminded that when we focus on the views at the center, the commonalities of the majority and not the hateful and terrifying policies of the religious right, there's still some hope to be found. But the real hope for me was renewed by the article that Dov Lipman wrote upon his return from Limud. Maybe some of you read it. Entitled, "Jewish Unity is Possible, Limud Proved It." Rabbi Lipman described the matzav, the situation, in the following way. In Israel, where a majority of Jews live, half our nation supports Netanyahu and the judicial reforms, half are vehemently against Netanyahu, and high numbers demonstrate against the judicial reforms weekly. In the USA, the second largest Jewish population in the world, we're also split, those who support Trump and those who are strongly against him. And among the rest of the diaspora Jewry, we find a similar split regarding what is happening in Israel and in the US, and I'm sure there are local issues about which we are similarly divided. These divides, he writes, have led to major fissures in our nation, to the point where neighbors and family members will no longer even associate with one another. Communities and relationships have been torn apart. And after painting this distressing picture of the Jewish world for us, Lipman then describes the Jewish community that he experienced at Limud, South Africa. There were source-based Torah classes, lectures about contemporary Jewish and social issues, panel discussions about politics and challenges facing the Jewish people, and interactive music sessions. The Shabbat retreat in Johannesburg, attended by 500 people, certainly created a challenge, he writes, with a blend of people who observe Shabbat and those who don't. But those in attendance found a happy median, with Shabbat observance in the public areas, options for different types of prayer services, and everyone coming together for the rituals of Kiddush and Havdalah to begin and end the Shabbat. There were many debates and disagreements about all the topics, but for the most part, they were respectful and intellectually honest, devoid of the name-calling and hyperbole which have marked this past year, and which only serve to increase the tensions and polarization among us. Limud, South Africa, he wrote, demonstrated that Jewish unity does not mean that we agree with one another. It does not mean that we are all on the exact same page and live similar lifestyles. Rather, it means that we accept and even embrace one another's differences. Jewish unity means approaching the opinions of our ideological, theological, political, and philosophical opposites with tolerance and respect. It means recognizing that when it's all said and done, we as a Jewish people only have each other, and we can only survive with an understanding and appreciation of the need for coexistence. And then Rabbi Lippman closed with these words: "It is my hope and prayer that the example set by the organizers, presenters, and attendees at Limud South Africa 2023 will be followed by Jews around the globe. May we be blessed to internalize the lesson that we don't have to agree to be unified, that we can and even must debate all issues with passion, but we must also add respect for one another into the equation and not allow those disagreements to rip ourselves apart. It's all about choosing dialogue over distance," he writes, "open-mindedness over obstinance, humility over ego, and the confidence to allow space for vulnerability and discomfort in order to remain unified." Amen. Ve'amen. Ve'amen. It seems that we, in often divided Jewish South Africa, have given Dov Lippman hope, or at the very least, we've confirmed his views of what might be possible in an Israel of the future. And if that Israel has leaders like Dov Lippman at the center, if we can unite our hopes for Israel with his and with those who have enough hope to march in the streets week after week and month after month, if this female progressive rabbi can have her spirits lifted by an Orthodox rabbi and politician, if Jewish unity can be found, can be protected, can be taught, then Hatikva, the hope of thousands of years, is not yet lost. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you're ready to stand again. Page 222, you've got a second. I mean, you can stand, but I'll even give you a little more. Page 222. Please read responsively the indented words. Loving Father,
infinite power,
gentle forgiving,
lofty inscrutable,
Avinu,
Alkenu,
compassionate Mother,
omnipotent Lord,
comforting Presence,
fathomless mystery,
Avinu,
Malkenu,
our Rock and Redeemer,
life of the universe,
close to us always,
impossibly far,
Avinu,
Malkenu,
embracing,
confounding,
accepting our frailty,
decreeing our end,
Avinu.
Malkenu,
None of these are true, none of them are you. Yet we stand as those before us have stood, summoned to judgment, longing for love. Avinu Malkenu. May these words be a bridge. They come from our hearts. May they lead us to you. We're going to open the Ark, so I'd like to invite David Kvitsky and Lynn Kvitsky to open the Ark. We're also going to need, at the end of Avinu Malkenu, Glenda, it says Glenda or Eugene, to carry the Torah.
Avinu Malkenu, Shema Koleinu.
Avinu Malkenu, Chata
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, V'alo Aleinu, V'tzar